My Testimony by Shansung. This post was originally written in 2004 in Chinese for a Chinese gospel magazine and was translated into English in 2010 and revised in 2018. After rereading the post, I realized it was poorly written, but I still feel it reflects my spiritual condition in 2004. In the future, I plan to write another testimony telling the story of my salvation from a different perspective that reflects my spiritual growth throughout the years. The hopeless condition of man is the beginning to knowing God. My hometown is a small village in the south of Hubei province. It is adjacent to the Hunan province and is situated near a river. My family was poor, but we started to earn more money when my father began to work at the local township auditing department. My mom stayed in the village to grow crops and feed pigs. Despite the hardships, my family's financial situation was more stable than other families in the village. As a child, I always wondered why we lived on Earth. I would always think about this in my yard while looking up at the stars. Sometimes I sat on a small hill near my village, pondering my future. Where will I be in the future? My older sister enrolled in college in 1981 and was the only one to be accepted to college in our whole county that year. This turned into a huge event. Not only did the local teaching authority pay a lot of attention to this, but it also caught the attention of my grandpa and other family members. It was not common for a child from a rural village to enter college. Also, people in the village were prejudiced against females, so my grandpa said that my brother and I must be accepted into a college too. When it was my turn to go to college, I was accepted into a college in Beijing. However, I faced many hardships. Not only was I pressured financially, but I also had to face inequalities. There are always prejudices against people from rural or poor areas in China. I felt hurt inside and sometimes became very passive. After 4 years of college, I stayed and worked there for another 4 years. However, I wasn't satisfied with that life. I still felt empty and didn't know what my purpose in life was. Because of this, I decided to study abroad, which is the dream of many Chinese students. I received a joint offer from the London School of Economics in the UK and the University of Southern California. Although I was invited to attend, I still had to pay tuition. The tuition for the university in London was around £10,300. I only had £10,000 at that time. By the third semester, I ran out of money. I did not have enough to pay rent, tuition, and living expenses. I was also unable to find a job. I decided to ask my family for help, and they gave me £1,000. Afterward, the university offered to help me with my tuition. My problem was solved for then. Knowing I would need money, I began to look for a full-time job. One day, I was lingering in a park near McDonald's when I heard people singing hymns. This attracted me to their gathering in the park. It turns out they were a group of Christians. Not only were they singing, but they also portrayed through a play how Jesus was crucified. I was so touched and could not help but cry. One sister named Mary came up to me and shared with me about God. I asked her if she had ever seen God. I asked, "How can you say there's a God if you've never seen him?" She said she didn't believe either when she was a student at Oxford, but one day she went to a meeting with her father. She was touched watching her father share something about the invisible Christ with other Christians. She reasoned that her feeling touched was probably God because she didn't have these feelings before. Mary later sent me a Bible and asked me to come to her church. Unfortunately, I never had a chance to visit because I had already started to work at McDonald's part-time. I worked the night shift, starting from 8 p.m. to 3 or 4 a.m. It was very tiring. Sometimes I tried to get up in the morning to visit her church, but I didn't have the strength to wake up. I had already finished my first year of school in London at that time, and I was looking forward to coming to the U.S. to finish my second year. However, again, I did not have the money. In order to go, I would also have to receive a visa. I found a way to get the school to send me the I-20, which is a U.S. government form that provides supporting information for the issuance of a student visa. And then I applied and got the F1 visa as well. I still did not have the money yet. I waited, as I hoped to get a scholarship from USC, but they replied very late and only gave me a tuition waiver for 8 credits. I had to finish 24 credits to graduate. It was a painful struggle to decide if I should come to the U.S. I had the visa, but I did not have enough money. I really didn't want to go back to China at that time for several reasons, and I was not satisfied with my 1-year study in the UK. Most importantly, I felt I was searching for something that I hadn't found yet. My life was full of anxiety. I cried out in my innermost being, saying, "Whoever gives me peace, I will believe in him." Finally, I decided to go to the USA with a one-way ticket and a couple $100. When I was on the airplane, I recall not even having a plan nor knowing what to do. The first night in America, I stayed at a classmate's house. The second night, I had to move out, but I had no place to go. I decided to sign the housing contract with the school, and I had moved into the dorm. Unfortunately, I couldn't sleep all night. The next morning, I went to the registrar's office, but I even wavered about registering. I knew that if I registered, I would have to pay the fee. If I didn't register, I would have to go back to China immediately. I wandered outside of the office from morning until late afternoon. It was a painful experience not knowing what to do. Eventually, I made up my mind to return to China, because I realized that I could not survive there in the U.S. with little support. I had already fulfilled my dream by coming to America. I started to look for some Chinese students to ask where I could find a travel agency to buy a plane ticket. Just before I did this, I cried out again to God from my deepest parts. "God, I am such a sinner. Do you still remember me?" I remember exactly how I said it, and it was in English, not in Chinese. After I did that, I felt peace in my heart, and I proceeded to try to buy a plane ticket. Eventually, a student came in my direction from across the street. I was having a tough time telling if he was Chinese or Korean. It turned out he was Chinese and a brother from the church in Los Angeles. I asked him about a travel agency, and he asked me why I wanted to go back. When I told him the reason, he commented that I should not go back, but rather stay and finish my studies in America. After our conversation, he brought me to the brother's house, which was near campus. We fellowshiped for a time with the church elder and brothers who lived in the brother's house. The brothers decided to let me move into their communal home. The brothers even agreed to let me pay the rent later if I had no money. Those brothers taught me how to pray, and we prayed together before we went to see the housing department to talk with my department director. The housing department agreed to cancel my contract, and the department director designated all of my 8 credits of scholarship to the first semester. As an international student, I was required to register at least 8 credits to become a full-time student. Originally, 4 credits would go toward the first semester, while the other 4 credits would go toward the second semester. The director's decision changed my future. All of my problems seemed to be solved in a couple of days. I even found a part-time job on campus to help cover food expenses and other needs. Although I still didn't have money for a second semester's tuition, the brothers taught me to pray to God and to make my supplications known. They encouraged me, saying the Lord would take care of my needs if I dedicated myself to Him. I admit that I felt sinful when I first believed in the Lord, so I prayed desperately for Him to take care of my needs and forgive all my sins. After half a year, I started to feel the assurance of God's forgiveness on my behalf. Thus my prayers changed. By God, with the help of our department director and fellow believers, I was able to pay a second semester's tuition. Unfortunately, I continued to struggle financially. Upon graduation, I couldn't afford the monthly meal expenses because I didn't have a job on campus anymore. I worked at a toy store for a short period of time, but I eventually quit this job because the boss was constantly cursing at the employees. To my surprise, at a time of desperate need, I received a call from a Chinese magazine that received my application for a job, and they wanted to interview me. Since I had no car, I took a bus there. At the final bus stop, the driver told me I was going in the wrong direction. I was actually going in the right direction, but I didn't know, so I started to walk in the opposite direction to take another bus. But after walking a little bit, a van stopped me on the street corner and asked me where I was going. Miraculously, a Hispanic man gave me a ride to the company, and I arrived for my appointment at exactly 9 a.m. When I thanked the man and asked him why he helped me, I also called him brother out of custom. It turned out he really was a brother because he was a believer. He said that he was touched when he saw me walking and decided that he would drive me wherever I needed to go. He also said he would generally never stop for a stranger, since he had 3 kids in the van in car seats. They were on their way to a daycare center. I ended up getting the reporter job at the Chinese magazine. But when the boss requested that I have an interview in a certain other place, I told her that I did not have a car yet. She cried out, "My God!" Despite this setback, they still hired me. The other boss asked me to get a car as soon as possible, but until then I could take the bus to work. At that time, a brother had recently moved out of the brother's house and left an '84 Lincoln Town Car for me to use. The only setback was that I did not have a driver's license yet. I quickly set out to get this. Although I failed a couple of times, I finally got it by the due date my boss gave me. Another setback came, however, during that month without a car. Just a couple days after working at this place, the bus I normally took to work suddenly stopped running. All of the MTA bus drivers in Los Angeles had gone on strike for a month. Thankfully, one private bus still ran from my company to downtown LA. I only had to get to and from its bus stop. This was taken care of when a Korean brother agreed to drop me at the bus stop on his way to work each morning. After I got off from work, I took the bus downtown and waited for other brothers to take me home. This sometimes took a couple of hours, but I used this time to recite the verses from the book of John while I waited. I was so touched by the brotherly love they showed me. This challenging time led me to receive the Lord and dedicate myself to Him. During my journey, I witnessed many things I would deem miracles. After I started to work, my financial situation improved. The Lord's hand continued guiding my life. I got that job in November 2003. In that same year, I overheard some believers talking about a conference to be held in August called the New Jersey Chinese Speaking Perfecting Training. This is an annual Chinese-speaking conference within our denomination. Many commented that the Lord's Spirit was powerfully working there, and I heard that a brother from the church in Riverside was completely changed after participating in this training. I set my mind to go and was determined to attend this training in 2004. I knew I would experience substantial changes in my life from this meeting. I came to understand that this prompting and expectation wasn't from me. It was the Spirit leading me. In that meeting, in August 2004, at the church in Franklin, the Spirit was everywhere. The main topic in that training was regarding the necessity of dedicating your whole being to the Lord and to prepare for His second coming. Everyone was encouraged to dedicate himself or herself to the Lord. I refused to do so, even though many brothers urged me to. The second to last time, 2 brothers urged me again to dedicate myself to the Lord, but I still refused. They looked at me with judgment in their eyes, but I didn't take it personally. However, I strongly felt judgment from the Lord. He seemed to remind me, "How many times did you say that you would dedicate your life to me if I did certain things for you?" In a second, I recalled all of my prayers in which I asked the Lord to take care of my needs in exchange for the dedication of my life to Him. I had forgotten them a long time ago, but the Lord always remembers. That night, I knelt and prayed to the Lord. "Lord, I still have a hard time believing the truth about your second coming. I would dedicate myself to you if you reveal this to me." When I fell asleep that night, I had a strange sensation. I felt two people fighting for my heart. The Lord was stronger, and He took it. The next day, I wholeheartedly dedicated my life to the Lord. Later, while one brother was talking about the New Jerusalem, I felt the heavens open up in my spirit. The Lord spoke to me. "If the body of Christ, the New Jerusalem, is built up, I will come back." Finally, having a vision like this proved to me that only those with lives dedicated to the Lord could have this kind of spiritual vision, because it is only discerned spiritually, just like many brothers had told me. I was completely changed when I came back from that training. I was also motivated to stop a lot of unhealthy habits as I started to pursue the truth. To help me, I read the book Life Study by Witness Lee every day. The believers in my locality were very surprised that I had changed so much.